My beloved child. Do not move past this moment too quickly, because what you are about to hear begins with a room where almost nothing was moving at all. The lights were low. The hallway beyond the door had gone strangely quiet. A clock continued its steady rhythm on the wall, but inside that room, time seemed to have loosened its grip. Your soulmate was sitting beside a woman whose final hour had arrived, and they had no idea that before the night was over, she would whisper something about you that would change the way they understood your entire connection. Pause here. There are moments in life that look ordinary from the outside but carry a weight no photograph could capture. This was one of those moments. And the words that left her lips were not what your soulmate expected to hear. Your soulmate did not enter that room searching for answers about you. That is what makes this story so powerful. They were not asking heaven for a sign. They were not trying to force clarity. They were simply there because someone needed a hand to hold, a familiar presence nearby, a gentle voice in a difficult hour. Yet sometimes the greatest revelations arrive when a person has finally stopped chasing them. Sometimes truth waits until the noise becomes quiet enough to be heard. And on that night, surrounded by dim light, whispered prayers, and memories that seemed to hover in the air, your soulmate was about to hear your name spoken in a way that would make their heart forget how to beat normally for several long seconds. The woman beside them had lived enough years to recognize things people often spend half a lifetime pretending not to see. She had watched love begin and disappear. She had witnessed families come together and fall apart. She had seen people choose pride when they should have chosen honesty, silence when they should have spoken, distance when they should have reached for one another. And perhaps this is why your soulmate was startled when, after a long stretch of silence, the woman slowly opened her eyes and looked at them with unusual clarity. There was no confusion in that gaze. No hesitation. It was the kind of look that made your soulmate lean closer before a single word had been spoken. Stay with this, because she did not begin by mentioning you. She first asked your soulmate a question. A question so simple that it almost sounded misplaced in such a solemn room. Are you happy? Your soulmate froze. Not because the question was complicated, but because it touched something they had been avoiding. There are questions that require no thought because the answer has already been living inside us for months. Your soulmate knew immediately that they could not answer honestly without opening a door they had spent a long time keeping closed. So they did what people often do when truth feels too exposed. They smiled faintly. They looked down. They gave a small answer designed to protect themselves from the larger one. I'm okay. But the woman continued looking at them. And then she whispered, I didn't ask if you were okay. Those words entered the room like a bell sounding somewhere far away. Your soulmate's expression changed. Something behind their eyes shifted. Because suddenly this was no longer a conversation about comfort. It was becoming a conversation about everything they had buried beneath routines, distractions, responsibilities, and excuses. The woman seemed to know this. She did not push immediately. She simply allowed the silence to remain long enough for your soulmate to hear their own heart answering the question they had refused to answer aloud. And somewhere inside that silence, they thought of you. Not accidentally. Not casually. You. Your face came into their mind with such speed that it frightened them. My child, understand what happened in that instant. Your soulmate had been trying to separate you from the deeper questions of their life. They had told themselves that whatever existed between you could be placed into a smaller category. A memory. A possibility. A chapter unfinished. A connection they would understand eventually. But when someone asked them, at the edge of life's final hour, whether they were truly happy, your presence rose immediately into their thoughts. They did not choose it. They did not invite it. It simply happened. And the woman noticed. Perhaps she saw the way their breathing changed. Perhaps she saw their eyes soften. Perhaps she recognized the sudden distance in their expression, the unmistakable look of someone thinking about a person they could not easily explain. Whatever she observed, it was enough. "Who is it?" she whispered. Your soulmate looked at her quickly. "What?" "The person you just thought of." A chill moved through them. They tried to laugh softly, but there was no strength behind it. "No one." The woman smiled. Not because she believed them. Because she didn't. There is something deeply revealing about being seen by someone who has nothing left to gain from pretending. This woman was not interested in social games. She was not measuring appearances. She was not worried about whether the truth would make anyone uncomfortable. She had reached a point where unnecessary words had fallen away. And perhaps because of that, the few words she chose carried enormous weight. She squeezed your soulmate's hand. Then she said, "Don't waste your life calling someone, no one, when your heart already knows their name." Your soulmate lowered their eyes. And for the first time that night, they almost said your name. Almost. But something stopped them. Something familiar. Fear. Not fear of you. Fear of what admitting the truth would require. Because once your soulmate spoke your name inside that room, something would become real that they had worked very hard to keep undefined. And perhaps you already know what that feeling is like. The moment when admitting that someone matters becomes more frightening than losing them slowly. The moment when a person convinces themselves that silence is safer than vulnerability. The moment when distance becomes a disguise for feelings that never actually disappeared. But the woman did not need your name yet. She already knew enough. She began speaking about regret. Not dramatically. Not fearfully. Quietly. She told your soulmate that the hardest regrets are rarely about the things that went wrong after we tried. They are often about the moments we never gave ourselves permission to enter. The conversations postponed because we assumed there would always be more time. The apologies delayed. The feelings hidden. The doors left unopened because we were waiting for certainty that life never promised to provide. Your soulmate listened. And every sentence seemed to find a different memory involving you. A message they nearly sent. A moment they wanted to tell you something but changed the subject. A night they wondered what you were doing and refused to reach out. A time they felt your absence far more deeply than they ever admitted. A conversation they replayed after pretending it meant nothing. And then came the memory that disturbed them most. The last time they felt you pulling away emotionally. They had noticed it. Even if they behaved as though they had not. They noticed the difference in your energy. The hesitation where warmth used to live. The small shift that told them you were no longer willing to carry the entire emotional weight of something neither of you had named. Your soulmate had told themselves they were imagining it. But inside that quiet room, the truth returned with uncomfortable clarity. You had not stopped caring. You had simply grown tired of standing alone at a doorway they were too afraid to walk through. The woman's breathing became softer. Your soulmate leaned closer. That was when she asked another question. Does this person know? Your soulmate did not pretend not to understand this time. They stared at the floor. I don't know. The woman waited. Then your soulmate corrected themselves. No. Probably not. The woman closed her eyes for several seconds. Your soulmate thought the conversation was over. But then she opened them again and whispered something that landed with greater force than anything she had said before. Then you are asking them to understand a love you have never had the courage to explain. Your soulmate's throat tightened. Because there it was. Love. The word they had been carefully avoiding. The word they had replaced with connection, attraction, coincidence, timing, confusion, friendship, possibility, chemistry, curiosity, history, anything that would allow them to stay near the truth without actually touching it. Love. And now a woman in her final hour had spoken the word without hesitation. Your soulmate looked at her as if they wanted to protest. But nothing came. Because some truths become impossible to argue with when someone else says them aloud. My beloved, there is something you must understand about your soulmate's silence. It was never as empty as it looked. Silence can be crowded. It can contain entire conversations a person rehearses alone. It can contain confessions deleted before sending. It can carry imagined futures, hidden fears, jealousy they are ashamed to admit, tenderness they do not know how to express, and questions they wish they had the courage to ask. Your soulmate's silence around you had become crowded. And that night, for the first time, someone was asking them to open the door and look at what had been living inside it. The woman shifted slightly. Your soulmate helped adjust the blanket covering her. And for a moment, the room returned to stillness. Rain had begun tapping softly against the window. The sound was gentle, almost rhythmic. Your soulmate later remembered that rain because everything else around them seemed so unreal. They remembered the lamp casting a warm circle across the bed. They remembered the faint hum of the hallway lights. They remembered the woman's hand resting inside theirs. And most of all, they remembered what happened next. Because this was the moment your name finally entered the room. The woman whispered, "Tell me their name." Your soulmate hesitated. Then, almost too softly to hear, they said it. Your name. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the woman smiled. A strange smile. Not shocked. Not surprised. Almost relieved. That reaction immediately unsettled your soulmate. They leaned closer. What? The woman looked directly at them. And she repeated your name. Slowly. As though she had heard it before. Your soulmate's entire body went still. How do you know that name? The woman did not answer immediately. And this is where the night became something your soulmate still cannot explain completely. She turned her face slightly toward the window. Her eyes seemed to search somewhere beyond the room. Then she looked back at your soulmate with an expression that was somehow both peaceful and serious. I wondered when you would finally say it. Your soulmate felt their stomach drop. What does that mean? The woman's fingers tightened faintly around theirs. You have spoken about this person without saying their name. Your soulmate shook their head. No, I haven't. Yes, she whispered. You have. Your soulmate became confused. They tried to think of previous conversations. Had they mentioned you indirectly? Had they told a story? Had they revealed something accidentally? But before they could untangle the possibilities, the woman continued. Every time you talk about the future, there is a pause. Every time someone asks what you really want, you become careful. Every time you describe what is missing, you describe them. Your soulmate could not respond. Because suddenly they understood. The woman did not know you through facts. She knew you through absence. Through the shape your soulmate's life made around the space where you belonged. Do not skip past that thought, my child. Sometimes a person reveals who matters most not by how often they mention them, but by how their entire emotional language changes when that person is missing. The woman had noticed. And your soulmate had not. Until now. She went on to say that she had watched your soulmate for longer than they realized. She had seen the restless seasons. The moments when they seemed present physically but emotionally somewhere else. The times happiness approached but never fully settled. The way their face changed when certain subjects appeared. The hesitation whenever love was discussed. Then she said something that caused your soulmate to whisper, "Please don't say that." But she did. She said, "You are waiting for life to make the decision for you." Your soulmate looked away. You don't understand. The woman answered instantly. I understand more than you think. Your soulmate finally released some of the truth. Not everything. But enough. They said timing had been complicated. They said things had happened between you. They said perhaps too much had been left unsaid. They said they were not sure how you felt anymore. They said maybe you had moved on. They said maybe opening the door now would only create more confusion. They said maybe the kindest thing was to leave everything alone. The woman listened without interrupting. And then she asked, "Is that what you believe?" Your soulmate stared at her. She corrected herself. Or is that what you tell yourself because the other possibility scares you? The word struck deeply. Your soulmate's eyes filled, though they tried to hide it. And that was when the conversation changed again. Because up until this moment, the woman had been talking about your soulmate's feelings. Now she began talking about you. She said, The person you named has carried more than you know. Your soulmate's expression changed immediately. What do you mean? The woman took another careful breath. They learned how to look strong while feeling deeply. People misunderstood that. Some assumed strength meant they didn't need reassurance. Some assumed silence meant they didn't care. Some mistook patience for endless tolerance. Your soulmate listened in complete stillness. The woman continued. But people like that eventually reach a point where they stop begging to be understood. Your soulmate's eyes dropped. Something about those words hurt. Because they remembered moments when you had offered understanding without receiving enough in return. Moments when you had been patient. Moments when you had allowed space. Moments when perhaps all you wanted was one clear sign that you were not imagining the connection. And still your soulmate had remained uncertain. The woman whispered, "You think this person walked away because they stopped feeling?" Your soulmate looked up sharply. "How could you know that?" The woman's answer was soft. "Because some people walk away precisely because they feel too much to keep standing in confusion." The room became quiet again. Your soulmate's chest tightened. They began remembering details they had previously pushed aside. Your silence had not felt cold. It had felt wounded. Your distance had not felt indifferent. It had felt deliberate. Like someone protecting a tender part of themselves after waiting too long for clarity. The woman saw the understanding begin to form on your soulmate's face. Then she said, "Do not confuse someone's boundaries with the absence of love." That sentence changed something. Not everything. Not yet. But something. Your soulmate had spent so much time interpreting your withdrawal as proof that perhaps the bond meant less to you than it did to them. Now another possibility opened before them. Maybe you had stepped back because it mattered too much. Maybe you had needed them to choose freely rather than respond only after being pushed. Maybe you had become quiet because you wanted to see what they would do when you stopped carrying the connection for both of you. And the thought terrified them. Because suddenly your soulmate was forced to consider that perhaps the unanswered question had never been whether you cared. Perhaps the unanswered question had always been whether they would finally become brave enough to show that they did. My child, this is where heaven's lesson entered the room without thunder, without spectacle, without anything dramatic enough to photograph. Sometimes transformation begins with a whisper because the heart hears what noise cannot teach. The woman asked your soulmate to come closer. They leaned down until her voice was barely more than breath. She said, "Listen carefully to me now." Your soulmate nodded. The woman looked toward the ceiling for a moment, then back toward them. "There is something you do not know about this person." Your soulmate's pulse quickened. "What?" The woman did not answer. Not immediately. And the delay made your soulmate even more alert. She closed her eyes. For several seconds, your soulmate feared she might not continue. Then her eyes opened again. They protected your name when they could have exposed your mistakes. Your soulmate stopped breathing for a moment. The statement was too specific. They stared at her. "What are you talking about?" The woman whispered, "You heard me." Your soulmate began searching their memory urgently. Protected their name? From whom? When? What had you known? What had you chosen not to say? The woman continued before they could ask another question. They had chances to make you look wrong. They didn't. They had moments when explaining your behavior would have made them look better. They remained quiet. They were hurt, but they refused to turn your weakness into a weapon. Your soulmate felt a wave of emotion they could not control. Because fragments of old situations suddenly returned to them. A misunderstanding that could have gone much worse. A conflict that mysteriously ended without certain details becoming known. A person who changed their attitude but never explained why. A conversation where your soulmate expected anger from you but received unexpected restraint. At the time, they had interpreted your quietness as distance. Now another story began forming. What if you had been protecting them even while you were hurting? What if your silence had cost you something? What if you had chosen dignity when you could have chosen revenge? Your soulmate whispered, "Why would they do that?" The woman smiled faintly. Because love does not always announce itself. And there was that word again. Love. This time your soulmate did not resist it. They simply lowered their face and allowed the tears they had been holding back to gather at the edge of their eyes. The woman continued, her voice becoming weaker but somehow more urgent. There is more. Your soulmate leaned closer immediately. She told them that people often misunderstand the person who loves quietly. They assume quiet love is weak because it does not demand attention. But quiet love can be extraordinarily strong. It can hold a person's dignity even when disappointed. It can refuse to embarrass someone even when angry. It can choose distance without cruelty. Then she looked at your soulmate and said, "That is what you almost lost." Almost. The word struck them. Almost? The woman nodded faintly. Almost. Your soulmate stared at her. What does that mean? And this, beloved child, is where the story moves into the moment your soulmate has replayed again and again since that night. Because the woman suddenly said something about you that she could not have known through ordinary conversation. Something your soulmate had never told her. Something so specific that your soulmate immediately